Hello, and a belated Happy New Year from me, David Jones. I thought I'd kick the new year off by having a look at some of the major markets and how I'm looking to trade them in 2025. And also a couple of other markets that I think are interesting, but are not that mainstream. So we'll have a look at those as well. So that is what this video is all about. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start things off with the old favourite, the S&P 500. So in 2024, the S&P gained 23%. So a good year for broader US stock market indices. The Nasdaq did better, particularly at the beginning of the year, but overall the Nasdaq 100 was up 30% in 2024. The Dow up 13%, so still positive, but lagging behind the other two. So a good year for US stock markets. All-time highs hit in December. Not so brilliant for other markets. The Nikkei did okay. So the Japanese market did 19% in 2024. Let's have a quick look at that. It was a pretty volatile year for the Nikkei. It was going really well. And then we saw it fall off a cliff in July and then bounce back. The FTSE, the UK FTSE, always a lagger, or more recently, always, well, actually, yeah, over the years, not a great performer, but up 6%, the UK's FTSE. But let's focus on the US. The trend is still up. You know, this is the S&P. So if we go back, to the COVID lows, you know, they're back there, down at 2,200. We had something of a sell-off in 2022, and then we had a recovery that, well, it based out in October 22. And then the bit of the trend that I've picked up on is from November 23. So just over a year ago. That trend's still going. Still, for me, I'd still be a buyer of the dip. You know, that is my view on the S&P. It's a market I watch every day. It's a big part of my investment portfolio. You know, S&P exchange traded funds and NASDAQ ETFs as well. And I think it's going to be an interesting year. I think we have been perhaps somewhat spoilt in recent years by the size of moves in US indices. I'll remember to drop this in after the edit, but to have a look at the performance over the last 10 years or so on an annual basis. So this is a quick bit that I added in after I'd finished recording, because I'd looked at it earlier in the day, and I thought it was interesting. This is generated by AI, so I'm hoping the data's correct. It feels right, but if you look at the last few years, going back to 2019, we've had good swings in US indices, 23%, 24%, minus 19% in 2022, nearly 27% in 2021, 16.2, 28.8, then a quiet year in 2018. So we have been spoilt in terms of volatility. You look at 2016, 9.5%, minus 0.7 in 2015, 0% in 2011. So there have been times when the S&P goes quiet, or indices, stock markets go quiet. And I think for me, because I've got used to it over recent years being big swings, there's always the expectation, well, it's going to be a big year one way or the other. And of course, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And you can see how for the last 5-6 years, you know, there's been big swings in both directions. We could always have a quiet year, couldn't we? You know, that would be, pretty boring. If we just saw a sideways year for US stock markets, perhaps we'll see them sell off. But for now, I'm going with this trend. You know, there's could be a lot of change in the US in 2025, given the new president and everything else. But for me, the trend is still up. It's been a bit of an uneventful couple of months. We've had plenty of volatility, but at the time of recording, you know, the market is back to where it was in early November. So no real change over the last 2 months, even though 2024 was a good year. So for me, you know, some of the levels to watch, an obvious one, let's call it 5,600 on the S&P. You know, I think if it starts breaking below there, back below these old highs from July and August, then perhaps the risk is this market is on the turn. So I think that's one area that I'll be keeping an eye on. But for now, at least, I'd be a buyer of the dip. Of course, the positive thing would be if we saw it break out to fresh all-time highs again, through around 6,100. Or something like that. I think that would be a positive sign. So a quick look at the Nasdaq. And the same for this one. You know, the trend, I've got the trend going back to the beginning of 2023. Plenty of volatility. But again, fresh all-time highs for the Nasdaq in December. mid-December. I'd still be a buyer of the dip on the Nasdaq. We've got big support. It's a long way away on the Nasdaq, but those, I mean, pretty much these lows from April 24, it didn't get too far away from that level in August. So overall, still positive when it comes to US stocks. Still looking to buy the dip. Let's see how 2025 unfolds. Let's have a quick look at Bitcoin. Not a market I trade very often, but I know obviously it's a popular market. So let's take a look at that. A great year for Bitcoin, up 120% by the end of the year. It came into 2024 in an uptrend anyway. It'd been trending higher since 2023. I think we hit the lows, the last lows, when was it? November 22, down around 16,000, 17,000. Was trending higher all the way through 2023, accelerated a bit in the end of 2023. Then we had this bit of just a drift really from March 24, until the US election, and that's really where it took off. So here we are, Bitcoin's traded as high as about $108,000, trading at 96 at the time of recording, and all positive. You can see the trend is still up. It's a long way away from that trend at the moment. We've gone into a more, should we say, a more accelerated trend that looks something like that. And again, it's still a bit of a way away from that. So I think a dip would be interesting in Bitcoin to see where the buyers step back in. I think if I was a buyer at the moment, based off the daily charts, I'd probably want to stop at least the other side of 85,000, which is on Bitcoin, it's $11,000 away, $12,000 away from where it is now, which is not much at all, considering the recent volatility we've had. So overall, still positive. The trend is up. It hit fresh all-time highs in December. Yeah, December hit fresh all-time highs. So still positive, perhaps a bit overextended, but let's see. Let's see what happens. But a dip would be interesting, but a great year for Bitcoin, up 120%. Let's take a look now at market that I think will be an interesting one in 2025. And of course, it's all to do with the new president, the new regime, the dollar index. So it was a quiet year for the dollar index. It was still up 7% in 2024. But you can see overall a little bit sideways, and it's really only the last few months that it really got a move on. At the time of recording this, right at the beginning of 2025, the dollar index, which is the US dollar against a basket of different currencies. So it's quite a good way of looking at foreign exchange and not having to look at the pound against the dollar, euro dollar, dollar yen, dollar Swiss, all that stuff. Just the dollar basket, DXY, as it is known on TradingView, on this charting platform. But yeah, it's hit fresh 2-year highs, so it's strong going into 2025. The big level, if I was going to be positive, and I am positive on it at the moment, and was coming up with a target, the big hurdle is up around about above 114, and those are the highs from September 2022. So like I say, it is going to be an interesting year to see what effect on the US economy Mr. Trump and his team have, and how that filters through to how investors and traders think about the US dollar. So a positive year in 24. I would be a buyer of the dip in the dollar index, considering it's just made a 2-year high. The trend, if I pick up on the latest bit of the trend, that's in September of last year. That trend is still up for now. So I'd be a buyer of the dip. 105 to 106 seems like interesting support. So, 300-400 points below where we are now. So I think it could be, a really interesting year for the US dollar after what has been some fairly sideways trading for the last couple of years, apart from the run over the last couple of months. So I think that might be an interesting one, the US dollar. Let's take a look at gold. Good year for gold. So the price of gold was up 27%. So outperformed the S&P. Boring old gold did better than the S&P. So yeah, a good year for gold. Broke out through the old highs. So these were the old highs, August 2020, just after the COVID lows in stock markets. So, God, that's 4.5 years ago now. I can remember all of that. And it doesn't seem like 4.5 years ago. Anyway, so broke out through those old highs fairly early on in the year, in March 2024. And since then, our trend looks like that. So obviously what happens with gold is reasonably contingent on what happens with the US dollar. So we'll see what happens with that. But overall, again, the trend is up. I'd be a buyer of the dip on gold. A good year last year, like I say, up 27%. Let's see what happens. I think for me, the big levels on gold, let's call it 2,450 upwards. So for me, while it's above here, that whole support band, I'd still be happy to be a buyer of the dip. I think if we see it start to drift below there, then perhaps the risk is this latest bit of the trend is running out of steam. But overall, a positive year for gold. And it started this year positive so far. Let's see what happens. But the trend is still up, so I'd still be a buyer of the dip. What hasn't had a positive year, not so much, but not a negative year either, is the price of oil. So that's the mainstream markets done so far. We'll take a look at some others, and then we'll have a look at these that are perhaps not on everyone's radar, but I think still could be interesting. Just a bit about some of the stuff I do. I run a WhatsApp group where I do daily updates twice a day, markets I'm watching, levels I'm looking to trade, trades I'm running, and I run an exclusive webinar every month. If you want to know who I trade with, a broker I've been working with, for almost a couple of years now. I've got no hesitation in recommending them. If you go to the link bit.ly/David Trade, you can find out more about them, open an account, try them out. It's tight spreads, so the cost of trading is low. You can trade small, which I think is really important if you're just starting to trade or trying out some different trading methodologies. And also you can link it into TradingView. So I can link it into my charts. You might have seen it on the live streams that I do. So if you go there and try those, open an account, see what you think. Like I say, I've been trading with them for a while and have no hesitation in recommending them. Okay, that's that done. Go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk to see more. But for now, let's jump back into it and take a look at some other interesting markets. Pretty dull, I think, is the best description for oil in 2024. The net change on the year for US crude oil, plus 1%. So started the year or ended 2023 around 71 and a bit dollars a barrel and ended 2024 at 72 and a bit dollars a barrel. And particularly the last few months of 2024 were boring ones for oil, just bumbling around these old lows, 66 to 68. And these are big levels from sort of way back here. If we went back March 23, 64 or thereabouts has been the low for oil, going back, to 2021, those sort of areas. So again, if it's going to bounce from anywhere, this is probably a good place, but we're not seeing much in the way of bounces so far. So quite the dull year overall. Plenty of volatility, of course. We did see the range for the year. It was as low as 66. It was as high as 88. So decent swings. But particularly the last few months, not much in the way of direction. So I think I'd probably still be leaning to be a buyer of oil. If we take this right out, this is going back to 2007. But we do get extended periods where the price of oil does not very much at all. And 2024 was one of those. Let's see what this year brings. But there's nothing at the moment jumping out being compelling as a compelling trade for me on oil, the way it's been trading over recent months. Let's see what the year ahead brings. Let's take a look now at a couple of markets that perhaps you haven't considered, but I think they're interesting. And let's start things off. Let's take a look at cocoa. So cocoa had a pretty nuts start to 2024. It had been trending higher anyway. If I take, there we go. So that was the trend in cocoa from September 22 up to the end of 2023. So the trend was most definitely up 12 months ago. And then in 2024, it went a bit ballistic. So it rallied like an absolute maniac into April 24, and then spent much of the year going sideways. But what's interesting to me is in the last month or so, we've seen the price of cocoa start to break out. And some of these agricultural commodities are interesting. We're going to have a look at another one in a second. And I think if we did see further strength in some of these, basic agricultural commodities, is it going to bring back the spectre of inflation? I don't know, but I think cocoa is an interesting market to watch because after that surge, it went from April to December, so about 7 months, not doing much at all, trading in a wide range, and it's broken out and the volatility has really picked up again at the end of 2024 into 2025. So I'd quite like to be a buyer of cocoa. I'm just not quite sure where my stop would go at the moment. Probably, I don't know, the other side of 9,000 if I'm trying to catch a bigger move. I don't know. Perhaps we'll see more over the next few days if trade settles down. But I thought it was interesting that a market that had such a fantastic run in 2024, early 24, went sideways and started looking a bit lively again towards the end of the year. So cocoa, the price of cocoa was up 195%, even outperforming Bitcoin. So there you go. All the crypto bros should have put all their money in cocoa, sell Bitcoin. Yeah, nearly 200%, so nearly tripled, isn't it, in 2024, the price of cocoa. Let's see what 2025 brings. And the other market is orange juice. I mean, what a textbook trend that has been in 2024. So this was up 58%, the price of OJ, as the Americans would say, in 2024. Textbook uptrend. These were all-time highs, I think, in mid-December. Yeah, and it had been trending higher for a few years before. I think it's interesting, where it started this year, it sort of bumbled its way back to the trend line. So, if you didn't know that was orange juice, if you thought that was some tech stock, it trades, these markets, if you haven't traded these markets before, they can get much more volatile now and again, but overall we have trends, they go up, they go down, they go sideways. So for me, I just treat it like any other market. But anyway, here we are with orange juice, back to that trend at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. So I think another interesting market to watch. So for me, I'd be a buyer of the dip, which is pretty much where it is now. And I'd have my stop probably at least below these September lows, which are 458 on my chart. But yeah, cocoa and orange juice. Let's see what they do in 2025. And of course, it will end up being the star performing market will probably be one that's on nobody's radar at the moment. I don't think there are many people who probably would have thought that cocoa would triple in 2024, for example. So it'd be interesting, we'll take a look at different markets, obviously, on the regular Friday updates. But for now, that's my quick look ahead for some of the mainstream markets and some of the not so mainstream markets for 2025. That's it for this update. I'll try and do more regular videos throughout the week on YouTube in 2025. My New Year's resolution is to try and be a bit more longer term in trading. I've been trading a more short-term approach for a few years now. For many years, I traded a longer-term approach looking at bigger trends, and I want to try and add that to my trading as the year goes on. You can see, by some of the performance of these markets that if you can ride these big trends, it makes a lot of sense. But like I say, to find out about the WhatsApp group and try that, if you use the code YouTube, you get 20% off the first month. Go to bit.ly/David Trade to try out the company that I trade with and that I recommend. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email. My email address is dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Otherwise, that's the first video done for this year. Let's see what January ends up looking like. If you could do all the usual YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, share, that'd be great. So until the next time, good luck with your trading.